this session for the building information modeling and innovation in construction. So in this session, we were supposed to have 6 presentations, but 2 apologized. So we have 4 presentations, starting with Rolla. So we have more time for presenters. So I would suggest that if you want to extend your presentation more than 20 minutes, so you can get 25 minutes and 5 minutes for questions towards the end. So after 25 minutes, I will raise a mark saying that there are 5 minutes left, all right? So I'd like to welcome Rolla to our first presentation.
Thank you. Automated health and safety documentation in construction site using image processing. As a background, accident in construction site is a result of many reasons, like worker training, lack of training, the lack of awareness of the hazard associated with the activity, site working condition, and even the design of the project could be a major cause of the accident. Even with the restricted codes and regulation for health and safety, till now the fatality in construction site, let's say from one of the activities which is falling from height, it's double than any other site activity. So safety procedure in construction site should be improved. Digital image processing is one of the computerized technique for advanced automation or advanced visualization method, and have implemented that technique in the project. The digital image processing method have been developed for progress monitoring for the past few years, mostly for progress monitoring, with less on the health and safety side, or minimizing the hazards associated with the activity. So automation and safety can be reliable computed through the use of digital image processing methods. Since steel construction, I choose the steel construction as a case study, can be one of the most hazard job in the construction industry. Therefore, automated process that can recognize the existence of a specific activity need to be developed. So the aims of this paper: first, to develop a system incorporating real-time progress image with the applicable site safety code standard and requirement. The system can determine whether this activity exists or not exists in a specific photo. The system can demonstrate the hazard associated with this site activity specifically, and can be played through advanced visualization tool. Objectives to introducing a new methodology to the field of steel construction safety, namely photographic analysis or image processing or image analysis. The proposed methodology is based on building information model, is comparing the BIM with the real-time image. Proposed automated method for efficient construction management by expecting the future activity, expecting the future hazard, and try to give a proper training for the worker before the activity. So the role of health and safety in construction site should not be limited to protection the worker, but should be extended to cover general public directly or indirectly in content with these sites. It's not only about the health and safety or of the worker. Sometimes the accidents also gonna lead us to lose lots of time and money in the construction site. An important objective of this role is the strict enforcement of the relevant law and regulations. So the regulations exist, but not always be followed 100%. That's why we have some accidents. Although the regulations themselves need to be reviewed frequently, and it depends on the activity itself. So a significant reduction in fatalities and major injury is being witnessed over the last years due to improvement and in the guidelines. And in this paper, you're going to see the work plan that we are proposing an automated system, automated health and safety system to enhance the awareness of the code. So the solution we are proposing is by using animation for health and safety. I mean animation video, or even we can show them to the worker in advanced visualization tool. Automated health and safety documentation system. The documentation system themselves will be generated automatically by the system. Health and safety training using advanced visualization tool, time-lapse video, equipment, and movie makers. This is all suggestion on the system. Now let me explain the system. On this side, we can find it's a 3D model of the building. We will compare, we can use BIM as well, using Navisworks or any other BIM software. Will be compared to real-time image. That's the image preview. We have 3 camera, fixed camera, south view, east view, west view, that taking photo per minute. And this is a real photo, will be compared to the 3D model. All will be compared to the BIM. And then the stage of the construction will be detected automatically, whether I'm in the first stage, foundation and the preparation, or second stage, third stage, and the fourth stage, which is the final and finishing of the building. So the first step is detecting the correct stage, and then we're going to compare whether an activity exists in this specific photo or not. For example, steel erection activity. Is it exist in this photo? Definitely yes. I can find the crane that carrying one of the beams. So activity exists. That the system can be detect automatically that the activity exists or not. Like in this photo, it might be a holiday or something that no one working, so no activity. So this is stage, we can also offer a training video for the worker depending on the activity. Let's say I just choose 4 activities from steel construction site. It could be in the photo. So if it's in the photo, the system will detect it automatically, and then they're offering a video training to the worker. We can use advanced visualization tool. What I mean by advanced visualization tool? Could be just a presentation, could be even with wearing 3D glasses and show it in a VR to the workers. So proposed work plan. So input image from platform image from an existing set taken from different angle, as I mentioned, south, east, and west. And then we will extract the area of interest from the site image, which is the important part, like we will, at the beginning, crop the unwanted, like the sky or the ground, and focus on the main interested area. Extracted feature from the photograph are compared with the BIM or 3D model, it depends. My case study doesn't need a BIM, so I use the 3D model. It will be compared with the BIM to identify the following construction activity and its associated hazard. We are interested into what is coming next. I'm not interested to find out the hazard of the activity if the accident is already there. Our aim is to prevent the accident, so we need to predict what's the coming in the future, what is the next activity. And then generate the safety report automatically. That part is the knowledge management, automation in knowledge management, because the system will generate the health and safety report, daily safety report, accident report, all will be generated automatically. And then the hazard report can be displayed by advanced visualization tool to enhance the appreciation by the worker on site. So we need a real image. So the project depends on an existing set of photographs. And these photographs were taken, in my case study, we choose the 3 cameras. It depends. You can choose even more or less. It depends on the project. And the frame rate was 1 photo per minute. Again, that can be adjusted. In the case study, the 1 photo per minute were suitable and convenient. Also, this project depends on BIM structure model, building information model. Otherwise, we won't be able to compare and guess the stage. The site photographs then will be subjected to image processing. I use MATLAB image processing to enhance the photo, to prepare the photo, and then start extracting feature from the photo. In this paper, I'm focusing on the site activity, and then identify the next stage activity from a 3D model, expecting the hazard associated with that activity, trying to train the worker before the activity started, trying to highlight the major hazards, maybe from the past accidents, to enhance their awareness about today's activity or then the upcoming activity, and make sure to minimize the accidents as less as possible. Conclusion: automate the production of activity and hazard identification form, which is a bit time consuming. In this method, it will be generated automatically. And the safety report, also the daily safety report, will be generated automatically. That will save manual time and effort. Enhance the understanding of the site workers. That's the most important thing, is to make sure that the workers are full aware of the hazard and the activity they are doing on a daily basis. And this will constitute a significant contribution to the reduction of the site accident. I hope so, hopefully. And I think it's time, we have time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rola.
Thank you. Well, it's actually, this is a part of my PhD. I even suggest that the worker should get a 3D VR tool, glasses, so they can pass through the accident, can visualize the accident before it happened. So we will highlight the area of the hazard where you can get wrong today. Make sure that you are 100% aware of the activity you are doing today and the hazard associated with that. And usually in the construction site, the same accidents happening again and again. Rarely we are having something new that never happened. It's just lack of knowledge management, no one learning from a previous project. I interviewed many site construction project, and some of them, if they have an experience, they told me like, we are facing the same accident in our previous project, or maybe he moved from another company, from another construction company to a new one, with no knowledge management documentation system. So he cannot explain the accident to the worker clearly before the activity. That's why it happened over and over again and again. So in my system, I'm trying to add up all of them, trying to have a knowledge management documentation system, and try to deliver it to the worker in a best way that they are aware of what is coming next in order to prevent the hazards. Thank you. Any other questions?
Envision activities or to forecast activities.
Yes.
It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen.
Why not using check the schedule?
We can, yeah. Sometimes it definitely, since the BIM is there, all the information will be there, including the schedule. But I want to make sure that each and every activity will be detected in like today activity. I want to make sure that I am in the correct stage, and I know what is coming next, and my workers is 100% aware of what's coming next, what is the hazard associated with the next activity. So yeah, definitely the BIM having this information, but the image processing is to detect the existence of the activity. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The time schedule is there, but who follow it in 100%? No one is following daily basis 100%. We know that today we have these activities, but what time exactly we are not sure. So I want to make sure to train the worker just directly before starting the activity. No, there is a database pool of the training videos, but from the image processing, since I know where I am now, I can suggest the videos that going to be chosen. So it's the choosing of the video, I can say it's semi-automated, not fully automated. Still I have a list like I have in my presentation 5 in here.
Because on any given day you have many activities.
This one.
So
I can suggest these 5, and the supervisor can choose which one is the more important that they can preview the video.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So it's like in real time, like
Real time, yes.
depending on the activity which is going to take
Yeah.
place, then it will be automatically generated.
Yes.
What kind of video, what kind of visualization you need to present to the workers.
Part of it, it's a real time. Part of it, even in the future, it's expecting the upcoming activity. What is the hazard associated? It's like alarm system.
Yeah.
Next, we have today, the next activity is a steel erection. The steel erection hazard is 1, 2, 3, 4. The accidents happen before. We have 3 different accidents. Let's show them to the worker to prevent them from happening
I was
again.
wondering about the, how would that affect the progression of the work at the site? Because there will be like a generic.
Well,
so
actually,
many
yeah,
videos will
yeah.
be generated, and then you need to address different activities taking place in the site. So
Yeah.
you need to disseminate this to all the workers at the same time, and this might cause a bit of delay in the progression of the work itself.
Well, actually, it's going to save time, because now what is happening? The supervisor meeting the worker and trying to explain himself about the hazard and activity, trying to talk to them. Most of the time, they misunderstand. That's why we have an accident, because they don't understand the instruction when the supervisor trying to tell them about it by words.
On this model, who will do that?
Visualization, it's all videos.
But, I mean, my model is linked to this question. Like, there's a process, okay, like with the BIM model, okay, and I'm not sure who the person will do this, okay, like to compare between BIM model and
The system.
yeah. So how that will be shared with the workers, and also like having this visualization system in like in construction side, even the VR sometimes it can be costly, okay, because like
No, the glasses is less than $1.
No, I mean if you need a VR system to it. I mean,
Yeah. I actually, yeah. This system is very cheap in a cost. It's not costly at all. And I try to make the videos. It's just MP4 video. You can visualize it in any VR 3D glasses or helmet, which is nowadays is around $1, $2 if it's maximum $10 each one. Regarding the time, as I mentioned, now every day the supervisor trying to meet up the worker, trying to tell them by words. Sometimes he shows them photos from his phone or iPad about the activities they are coming next and the hazard associated with it. And most of the time they don't understand. That's why we have accidents. For example, in Dubai, the workers came from a different backgrounds. They speak different languages. It's not the same language of the supervisor. So they don't understand what he's saying.
So visually communicating with them is going to be more effective.
More effective, saving time, and it's not costly at all, because the system have a pool of the activity. The supervisor just need to choose one of them. Even it will be like a shortlisted will appear. He just need to click and save his time. So I think that will save a time and money as well.
Ma'am, you want to add something? Yeah.
I think it should be highlighted, following up on your question, that the supervisor is meeting with them maybe early in the morning, executive not happening during the day where activities are.
Yeah, sometimes morning, sometimes when a new activity is coming up. Like morning, definitely they have a meeting, but let's say after like a couple of hours, they are starting a new activity. He need to meet them again and explain the hazard associated with that activity briefly, not in details. He will not be able to give them the image of an accident had been happened like 10 years ago, and he witnessed that. He cannot explain that unless he want to spend hours trying to tell the story from the beginning to the worker, making sure that everybody will understand. My videos is around 20 seconds, short video, and it will give you all the story within 10 or 20 seconds. And the worker will appreciate that, and they will understand the video much easier and much quicker than just telling them about it. Unless he forgot, for example, he forgot what happened and it keep happening again. Yeah, we cannot guarantee that he will tell them the hazard 100%. It's MP4 video, you can show them from a mobile device, screen, advanced visualization tool, anywhere.
And this will be automated or somebody?
Automated, yes. It will be automated.
That means maybe in future we can link that with some app.
I hope so, yes. I hope so, yeah. But you know, the system is having the problem I faced integrating all that. The Navisworks to work the BIM, the MATLAB to work the image processing, MP4. It was very hard for me to integrate them all in a computer. I'm not sure if we will be able to have them on an application, but at least the video definitely we can show them on a app, or maybe a limited version of it, smaller version of the software will be available in app, hopefully in the future.
We will have to leave it there.
Thank
take
you.
any other discussions after this.
Hi, good morning everybody. I'm Priya and I'm from Western Sydney University. So today I'm going to talk to you about smart modern construction businesses and how the business models are transforming as something called Industry 4.0 invades our industry. Before that, let me introduce you to my supervisory panel. I'm in very good hands. My supervisory panel is headed by Professor Srinath Pereira and is co-chaired by Dr. Sepani and Dr. Robert. And just to tell you that I've been really enjoying day one of this conference. I've learned, I've networked, I've been bowled over by the hospitality, and I've indulged in the beautiful Middle Eastern cuisine that we've been pampered with since yesterday. So now it's my turn to present you the paper. Before that, a little bit about myself. Prior to commencing my doctoral research, I was working for India's largest construction conglomerate, Larsen & Toubro Constructions. I began with planning, monitoring and control systems at large-scale transportation infrastructure projects, and then moved on into business development for Eastern India and other SAARC countries. Following that, I had the offer to work for a company called Katera. That is really important for today's discussion, and working for Katera actually pushed me towards my PhD because they are a Silicon Valley startup and they are disrupting the construction business model right from its core. So I'll be talking more about them as well. So to start off, a bit of background. So the World Economic Forum gives us 3 scenarios for the construction industry. They say that we will be building in a virtual world, that all our decision making will be essentially data driven and data will become a core to the industry. They also say that factories will be running the world. That is essentially a lot of construction will be moving from on-site to off-site, and we will be emphasizing on the manufacturing concept, and we will have construction production systems. And of course, all this will enable us or give us the ability to counteract the challenges to a sustainable and green world. So anybody in the industry would agree with me if I say that the construction sector today is living in a period of unprecedented change, and this change is definitely driven by rapid advances in technology. A lot of these changes are also because of something called Industry 4.0. Now, the world has seen 3 other industrial revolutions before this. The move from handcraft to mechanical processes took about 70 years, and that was the first industrial revolution. The second one was about the telephone, about the internal combustion engine. It lasted about 96 years, but it was interrupted by the First and Second World Wars, so essentially it was a shorter duration. The third industrial revolution was about personal computers becoming affordable, and it started around 1980s, and around 39 years later, it's still unfolding. Now, before I move on to the fourth industrial revolution, we must understand that the duration or the time to react or respond to an industrial revolution is decreasing as the degree of complexity is increasing. And this is why it becomes really important and critical for us to understand the trends of Industry 4.0, which is all about cyber-physical systems. It's about sensors becoming low cost and readily available so that we can embed them into systems for data acquisition and essentially data-driven decision making. So the construction industry has to make a giant leap into Industry 4.0, not having quite convincingly moved into Industry 3.0 itself. So this is what my research is about. Now, what is Industry 4.0 doing to construction enterprises? These companies are being pulled apart in different directions by the forces of globalization, industrialization, and digitalization. And they can't seem to counteract this pull, and there's essentially cracks in their business. And we've seen largest general contractors in the recent past collapsing. Carillion was one of UK's largest contractors with a bunch of government contracts, and they collapsed. Closer home in Australia, we've had Strongbuild, one of the companies who was trying out offsite construction, collapse. So the picture is not very good. And this is not based on geography, it's happening all over the world. We see that insolvencies in UK building firms rise by 20% after the Carillion collapse. Construction companies in New South Wales are collapsing at a record rate. So we need to do something about this, right? This is where we can significantly conclude that the construction business model is broken. And this is what was iterated by Professor Charles yesterday in his speech in the gala dinner. The construction business model is broken, and essentially we can say it is because we're not able to cope up with the challenges that Industry 4.0 is posing. Globalization, digitalization, and industrialization are adversely impacting all construction businesses as Industry 4.0 invades, and we're facing a daunting challenge of embracing these emerging trends that might lead to vulnerable cracks in our business, right? Thus, as these trends externally impact the business, it is essential that we explore the internal attributes of a business that will aid in its survival and growth. And this is why this paper reviews 2 distinct attributes to this issue. Firstly, it understands the trends of Industry 4.0 in terms of globalization, digitalization, industrialization, or offsite construction. And then it delves into the internal dynamics of the business in terms of business transformation, what has or hasn't happened in the construction industry, in terms of what the strategies should be, how the business model should transform, how the value propositions must transform, and finally represents this transformation in the form of a business model transformation canvas, right? So now I will tell you a bit about what we found when we were trying to understand the trends of Industry 4.0. When we come to globalization and construction, what we see is rationalization, heightened competition, definitely a lot from foreign competitors, but it's very difficult to evaluate this because it's fairly abstract, and we are radically a very fragmented industry. And our product is extremely diverse. Sometimes it's a service proposition, sometimes a manufacturing concept. If we add Industry 4.0 to it, in the dawn of Industry 4.0, digitalization coupled with globalization is enabling companies to use more and more complex worldwide supply chains, and data networks in their operations. Physical connectivity is being replaced by increased number of digital links. Cheap data storage and transfer have increased decentralization, flexibility of businesses, and we can say that the international company of the future might not even have a physical existence and might just operate from a few clusters. Coming to digitalization, which is really important, which is the construction technology ecosystem. Now, McKinsey published a report which said that construction is one of the largest sectors in the global economy, and we have about a $1.6 trillion of opportunity, and this is why a lot of people are jumping into construction and construction technology. So technology innovations that are and will continue to change the landscape of construction definitely will be BIM, will be Internet of Things, deep learning and artificial intelligence, collaborative robotics and drones, wearable technology, 3D printing, AR and VR, cloud computing, big data, and blockchain. So these are the technologies that will dominate. Sometimes mergers and acquisitions and investments that get into the industry often tells us about the trends in the industry. So we see that there has been tremendous investment going into the construction technology sector in terms of mergers, Autodesk buying a company called PlanGrid for about $875 million, and several others actually. And like I said, the company Kitera, they have raised several hundred millions in venture capital back-to-back from SoftBank. So there was immense interest, and these stats coupled with many acquisitions within the industry demonstrate how this trend will only continue as the industry delves further into digitalization. Coming to the Australian construction technology ecosystem, we can see that several attributes of the construction business, project management, on-site safety, or asset management, there are millions of applications already operating and companies using them to transform from manual processes to digital processes. Now coming to the next aspect in my analysis, which is industrialization. Now this is, if you see this picture, it is something that GlaxoSmithKline came up with. It is a factory in a box. So it's essentially a building packaged as a repeatable commodity, and the boxes are in fact shipping containers that contain every component packed in the reverse order that they will be needed for the reassembly process. So factory in a box cuts the construction program from 12 to 4 weeks, and it delivers an estimated 30% saving over to if it were built conventionally. So this is a prototype that they did with a factory or a shed, right? But now this is getting into construction of buildings, residential spaces. So this is how I introduce industrialization in it. So industrialization includes more standardization of materials, processes, more prefabrication, offsite production, platform-based approaches, and moving the value-added activities upstream in the supply chain. Which brings me to my modern part of the smart modern construction businesses. Now, what is modern methods of construction, and why are we talking about it today? So the industry now is sitting on a ticking time bomb because of the aging workforce, because of the acute housing demands, because of housing development strategies of several governments, and the government agencies are now looking at MMC as a solution. They're looking at a building as a constructed object to an assembly of highly sophisticated systems with multiple subsystems. They're moving from on-site to off-site, emphasizing on the manufacturing concept. And of course, this will better business efficiency, quality of product, customer satisfaction, etc. Also sustainability. So modern methods of construction or off-site construction, as I talk today, is nothing new because prefabrication has been there around for several decades, right? But it's something different today. Because we have freedom of design and integrated solutions as two very distinct attributes of off-site construction. Early prefab housing projects had a negative cultural perception of being cookie cutter and a one-size-fits-all kind of an approach. But today, off-site construction is a coexistence of efficiency of prefab, but with the personality of architectural design and design freedom. So the idea is to balance efficiency with design freedom. And construction buildings are designed as one-off prototypes, but building products like plumbing, electrical, mechanical, they are sold off the shelf. So it's like two ends of the same spectrum. And that leaves a lot of value on the table to be explored, and that's where integrated solutions come into the picture. If you take off the skin and finishes of two different buildings, they are structurally mostly similar, but with different skin and finishes, you can come up with two different products, right? So this is where integrated solutions come into the picture, and that is a game changer when it comes to building efficiently and inexpensively. Having completed the trends that are affecting organizations, now I decided to study what was happening inside of it, like inside of the construction business. And that's where I'm going to talk about Industry 4 and business transformation. So when the actual state of an organization is constantly challenged, it creates the necessity to follow new approaches to increase its effectiveness. So what we're doing today is measuring productivity, efficiency. Sometimes those are nominal factors, and that's not enough to map transformation or the kind of change that we are experiencing today. So facing a transformation, a company has to consider higher order systematic organizational aspects such as business models. Because business transformation is not binary, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Like I said, we can not rely on just nominal factors. We need to measure drifts over time. We need to measure incremental changes in value proposition that are required to ensure competitive advantage. This is why a potential source of progress for an organization today in Industry 4.0 is identifying, formalizing, and assimilating the experiences over time, the value propositions over time. And this is what we have tried to begin with the output of this paper. Now, if we talk of business transformation, one of the essential things happening there is disruptive innovation. I will not go into the details of it, but theory of disruption states that smaller companies with lesser resources often can come and render the incumbent absolutely obsolete. And we have seen that happening in several other industries, Uber, Netflix, several Airbnb, but it is starting to happen in the construction sector as well. Now what is important to see is that previously we were at a time here when disruption was not considered as a part of any company's strategy. Now we're at a time when some disruptions are happening but are infrequent, and it's extremely difficult to predict and map. But later on we're looking at a time when disruption will happen frequently in all areas in vast interconnected ecosystems. So if we move to a time like this, it will be easier for us to map transformation or to predict disruptions. But when we're still operating in this level, today it is very difficult for us to map. But at the end of the day, what all these boils down to is the business model, which essentially is broken. So the business model is a mediating construct between technological artifacts and the fulfillment of business goals. So it uses technology to make a business case and make money out of it, right? So, however, business model innovations are rare within well-established companies. Statistically, no more than 10% of innovation investment at global companies is focused on developing new business models. The reasons being, there are a few new sets of competencies that are required to do so. There is cannibalization of existing resources and a lot of loss of revenue making the management reluctant. So nobody wants to put money on learning how to innovate their business models, but essentially they would like to have better business models, right? So this is why we have come up with a business model canvas in terms of a construction business model transformation canvas in this paper, which talks of the 9 blocks of a business model that can be suitably adapted based on the detailed trend analysis that we did in terms of Industry 4.0 to best represent the tenets of business transformation in construction. So these 9 blocks of construction business model transformation are potential competition, value proposition, supply chain, client relationships, revenue streams, key resources, key activities, key partnerships, and cost structure, and it looks something like this. So if we can actually map an organization's transformation through Industry 4.0 in terms of these 9 blocks, we essentially will be able to do so. That's what we're trying to say. So firstly, looking at the key partners, we must understand how the partners are changing, how the suppliers and vendors are changing. Are the key resources being acquired from different partners now? Then in terms of key activities, essentially the on-site, off-site mix, how much of it is happening on-site and how much off-site. In terms of resources, if there are any newer resources required, like in terms of the construction technology ecosystem that I talked about, entirely different set of resources being required now. In terms of value proposition, are companies redefining the proposition? Is it service proposition? Is it manufacturing product? Client relationships are changing. Who is at the head of the client, contractor, supplier chain? Is somebody else gaining more importance than the other? How is the supply chain transforming in terms of data, in terms of being global? Potential competition is essentially very important because we're seeing non-traditionalist, non-obvious competition from companies that construction industry never expected would come into construction. And definitely the 2 bases of a business, that is cost structure and revenue stream. So essentially the cash flow will be modified when we have a transformation. So how is the cash flow changing? And are there more revenue streams? Can we offer new bundles of products or services for new revenue streams? So this essentially is the transformation canvas that we're looking at, and we're at this stage now, but we will be using this as a foundation of the empirical research for developing our maturity model of construction organizations transforming from a state of very low maturity in terms of Industry 4.0 capabilities and to a state of highly evolved state where they're really prepared to deal or tackle Industry 4.0. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I'd like to the authors would rather like to thank the Center for Smart Modern Construction at Western Sydney University. Taking a cue from our keynote speaker today, ours is a very unique center. We have partners which are SMEs, several construction SMEs from the New South Wales region who have partnered and collaborated and let us do this research so that they can impact or gain from what we find out, right? We'd also like to thank the organizers of this conference, our heartfelt gratitude towards them, and thank you.
Thank you, very interesting presentation, and this is actually part of what I'm doing at the moment. I've just introduced a new master's in managing innovation in our school at Edinburgh University. I realized that you're looking into the business model canvas, which is quite a traditional model, business model. It's one of the valid ones, of course.
Yes.
Did you consider looking into the exponential organization and the EXO canvas, which starts with entities of massive transformative purposes?
Not yet, but if you consider, even talking to a lot of people, nobody in the construction sector actually filled up this business model, the traditional business model canvas itself. And when we did,
that's right. That's absolutely right.
Yes.
What I'm trying is, if you're building on something, I would suggest that perhaps you look at the latest and you start from there, because the EXO came actually to discuss some of the how to improve the canvas.
Right.
So if we're trying to introduce something as interesting as what you're doing, actually,
Right.
it's fantastic piece of work, so congratulations on that. Perhaps if you build on the latest,
Definitely.
make it even, so it's, that's why I asked whether you consider that or not, because if you have, perhaps you can justify why you prefer to refer to the older one.
We will look into that, but most definitely we had considered some other models as well, but this fit in because this was the most simplistic approach. And when we did this exercise of filling up the canvas with a bunch of experts in the room from the construction sector, they find it really time consuming and hard to fill even this up. if you try to do it in a room full of entrepreneurs and co-founders, it's really easy for them. So we decided to start from here, and definitely we're going to look at the other options or the more latest ones as well. For me, my research is particularly based on a construction firm and how it's dealing with the current challenges in terms of surviving these and then also growing. In terms of facilities management, I will really be happy to tell you that the next speaker, also from my center, is going to talk at length about how we're trying to solve problems of issues with facility management. So just hold on for a bit. Thank you.
Actually, taking from that, I was wondering about who are the drivers behind this transformation, and whether or not they would be keen on this transformation. Because there will always be a question about like the creativity and the innovation in the design process, and how would a model like this affect the creativity and innovation in design?
This can be answered in two parts. Firstly, the drivers that would want to know more about this transformation and learn from it are SMEs, general contractors, because they want to survive and their business thrive. In terms of the design freedom, like I already talked about it, we're not looking at prefabrication like 10 years ago, where there was this perception that it's cookie cutter and it's one size fits all, it's like a repetitive design. We're looking at something very innovative, where you have two different products from the same core. So you're not repeating, but you're just integrating a lot of design and engineering, 90% of it in the upper end of the value chain, and that's like a game changer to build faster, effectively, and inexpensively. So there is design freedom. Like I said, the balance is between the factory efficiency and the design freedom. No way are we going to compromise on that.
Among the technologies which you've mentioned, you mentioned about 3D printing for buildings, and BIM and artificial intelligence. Which technology is more likely to be dominating in the future?
That is not a question that we're trying to answer in this research. We're just trying to see what are the technologies. But if you ask me personally, IoT definitely, I think. Internet of Things, because that goes hand in hand with Industry 4.0. And we are looking at a data-driven future. So data acquisition is the first step to that, and IoT enables that, so IoT. Yeah, in terms of drivers of off-site construction, like I mentioned, the aging workforce, we was discussed yesterday as well. So we need to do something to deal with the aging workforce and the skill gap that we will be having. Plus, there is acute housing demand. Plus, some of the governments have come up with development housing strategies that require them to build these many amount of houses in this much short time, and off-site construction kind of fits into all these equations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So there were actually a number of MSc and PhD studies within that program, and this is actually one of the PhD research study I'm going to present. It's about how we can actually intuitively implement building information modeling context into the university and industry. So basically, of course, we did initial, literature review and look at the industry context, and the Turkish construction industry is not any different than the other, other countries in terms of the implementation and execution of construction design and execution. But on the other hand, the construction sector is actually quite vital sector. It's a kind of a locomotive sector of the whole economy. So that's why its efficiency and its effectiveness and the quality is very, very important. On the other hand, but I have to say one thing. For example, the industry, in terms of efficiency, is actually very, very low. I mean, the Turkish construction industry efficiency is like a 40%. It's very low. So so people are actually aware of it, although they are actually performing quite well internationally. So the national performance is not actually as good as the international performance. But on the other hand, as we know that from industry, from best practice case studies, BIM is actually the way forward for the construction industry, for a transition from labor-based sector to knowledge-based sector. And then, so the issue is how can we actually now get BIM into the industry, to what extent it can be actually implementable, to what extent it can actually help to improve efficiency and effectiveness as a result. And those are the, the kind of research questions, for this piece of PhD research. So what are the underlying reasons for the setback of development of a BIM implementation framework for digital construction in Turkey, and what are the BIM integration methods and roadmaps should be, and how can we actually accelerate the digital transformation process, and what are the roles and responsibilities. So as we are, a group of, academics and some people from industry coming together under the umbrella of a non-profit organization, how can we actually make it, go, basically. And the aim was to, elaborate the core aspects, including technical aspects, business considerations, training, and regulatory to construction market transformation. And research actually addressing the challenges of how BIM adoption and implementation can be possible. And in this research, we explore large mega-scale construction projects, Istanbul Grand Airport project, a quite big project, and inevitably they had to use BIM because it was almost impossible to actually execute the project with a traditional way due to its large scale and the amount of complexity and uncertainties. And of course, we also implemented a industry-wide questionnaire-based survey. And the objectives under that aim was to explore the current practice and experience in the industry, and also explore the identified practical and theoretical barriers to BIM adoption, and accordingly take precautions and develop strategies within a framework, and then to overcome those barriers, and also not just to develop the framework, but shall we try to implement? If we can implement, to what extent such understanding or approach can be effective, can have some impact in the industry and academia to implement BIM. So this is a simple. I'm just keeping as concise as possible, and these are the research process and the stages in accordance with the research objectives. Of course, we did some literature review and then conduct quite not very big, but moderately big questionnaire survey, and then we actually go and visited the IGA project, the Istanbul Grand Airport project, and we also try to collect data from that project, and also based on the findings and the cross analysis from survey and case study, we develop a framework, and then simply then try to rationalize that framework for its validation and implementation on BIM, through practical engagements, basically. And in the questionnaire, of course, there were like about 22 questions, and then they were about, to what extent BIM is actually used in companies, and what is your understanding of BIM, what are the main barriers, so what sort of things you want, for example, to implement BIM, and what are the key matters, for companies or people or professionals, to implement BIM, and then, we, statistically analyzed and come up with some, common, I'm just very briefly showing here common, findings. Like, so we made the survey with more than 300 people, around 134 companies, and basically, the using BIM is actually very limited. Generally, the understanding is about modeling. BIM is Revit or Revit is BIM sort of thing. And then, there is actually huge resistance to to change. So people are actually very inclined to use their own existing methods and techniques. And at the university education system, BIM is just a very superficially touched upon it. And then there are some schools doing Revit tutorials and exercise, especially architectural schools. And the biggest obstacle in the industry is like a lack of technical staff and leadership. You know, people actually looking for technical staff who are competent, you know, in understanding and implementing and using BIM in terms of, you know, modeling and collaboration. And but BIM has already, as a concept, put some pressure on the industry because not from a government side, but also from actually international pressure, because most construction companies, there are actually some major big construction companies, they are practicing internationally. So when they actually go for international engagement or they're doing projects in Russia or Middle East or Asia or Europe, so there are, you know, contracts coming that you have to do with BIM. So there's, what is BIM? So I'm going to do it, you know. So if they don't have BIM capacity on BIM ability, they cannot actually go for tender.
For example, at the moment, they completed phase 1. It's actually a 3-phase project. They completed phase 1 last October. And you know, it's actually it has a capacity of to serve you know, the people about 76 million, and then indoor capacity of the terminal space like 3.5 million square meters. So number of passengers per year is like 90 million. And then when it is completed, that 3-phase, the 3rd phase when it is completed is going to actually serve for like passengers about 100 million people. And the number of employees work on construction site, about 30,000 people at the same time working. And the budget for the phase 1, like 10 billion euros. And it's starting from 2014 and 2018 is the finish time for the phase 1. And so the project, you know, phase 1 is actually completed on time. How is it completed? It's actually completed, you know, basically via BIM. They have to use BIM, otherwise it was not possible to complete it on time. So because of our visits and engagements, you know, in the project, time to time, we know that in the first 6 months of the project, they were actually they messed it up. They were busted because so many people coming on site and there is no proper coordination, and there is those design outputs or shop drawings, they are not actually talking each other, and so complicated. Within first 6 months, it's busted. They stopped because it's quite messy, and they couldn't carry on. I mean, these are some models, for example, from the BIM model of the Iga airport. All these not three actually, mechanical, electrical, architectural, structural models are combined, and as a result of BIM use in the project. So then the project they start starting and warming up and evolved over time as planned as a result of using BIM model. And they also use BIM. I mean, one of the uses like the quality control, mobile BIM. So there is actually a model. I mean, the model I showed you is like, about a 30 gigabyte model. It's a very huge model. So you have to use high-spec computers, to manipulate that model. So they were, for example, having the model, on tablets and checking the details of construction, to what extent the actual, construction is actually done in accordance with the model. So they can check and they can actually tick if it is done correctly. If it is not done correctly, so they can actually inform the headquarter, and then headquarter can actually inform the relevant people to redo or fix what is actually done incorrectly. So, so this actually helped a lot. So how much? I mean, we also try to document the amount of clashes as a result of using BIM on site. And so clashes like between baggage handling systems. So they were trying to implement a smart baggage handling system, and say, it's quite mechanical system, and to what extent it's actually matching well with the MEP system, and also MEP is actually well fitting itself as in terms of detailed design of MEP. So MEP with architectural design and structural. So we check VHS, architectural, structural, and cliffs as well. So it was in the main terminal. MEP clash that here, and blah blah. So, you know, but altogether, you know, that was that table produced last year April. So even before the project was completed. So altogether, more than 600,000 clashes actually identified, you know, in the project. So there are some dependencies as well. For example, when you actually identify a clash, so there are some dependent clashes. So you can automatically also fix those dependent clashes. So we also identify those, you know, the coefficiencies between those dependencies, you know, and actually reduce that, you know, 600,000 clashes to it's about, you know, 330,000 clashes. So in terms of correction. So how much money we save or they save, you know, as a result of those clashes, and we classify them big clashes, medium-sized clashes, and small clashes in terms of their impact if they actually incur on site, you know, and money-wise and time-wise. So the total figure, like more than 800 million euros saving. 5 minutes. So they saved. So it's almost like 10% of the budget, you know, according to the phase one of the project. And so these are like design departments and how they actually execute, how they implement in the project. So there is a BIM department, and BIM department has actually there is another modeling department, okay, but that was based in India because there were no currently existing BIM modeling capacity at very advanced level. So they were working a partner company in India, and basically they were getting the designs and BIM department actually getting the BIM model through this company, and then getting weekly meetings, around the big table there with a big meeting room with a big virtual reality system, and they were checking the model weekly basis and trying to plan weekly progress on site. If there's any mistake or if there's any clashes, it should be fixed even before it was executed on site. Right, and basically, from this eager case and survey, so we said, to be able to, we have to do something basically to develop more initial BIM standard rules and regulatory initiatives, to increase BIM and digital transformation awareness, and develop BIM education training programs. We have to do this, and supporting BIM level encouragement and encourage companies to be more sustainable, for building design and construction. And then identify this framework, based on the findings, basically, from the case study and the survey. Due to time constraint, I would like to just simply go to the implementation of the framework. So it is, we didn't leave it like that. Okay, if you use this framework, you are going to implement it. No, we try to implement this framework, in an intuitive and practical way, basically. So for the purpose of validation of the framework and for the purpose of the validation of the PhD. So we established kind of a Building Information and Management Association, a non-profit trust or organization, association actually, not trust. And then we identify the corporate structure, roles and responsibilities, implementation plan, and working mechanism. So that is actually plan to be established and to implement the conceptual framework for the digital transformation. And so we call it like BIM for Turkey. And under that, so we have corporate structure for communication and media, etc. And we have BIM atmosphere department, so we call BIM atmosphere. So people, especially students, so we try to get this, the keywords. So which is an atmosphere, it's a climate about BIM. So students, oriented space this. So we actually organize like events, summits, conferences, BIM days and BIM coffee talk. So people who are interested in can come together and share experience while drinking coffee. So different format. And also we also BIM for Turkey Academy, so looking into university education and also training and also committee. So based on their background, people can actually be part of a committee, and it's like education research and architectural design, construction, MEP committee, organization committee, sustainability, facility management, government, private sector, etc. So these are 7 or 8 committees. So based on interest, so people can actually be member of the committee and also be part of the engagements in the process. So as part of awareness building, for example, so we organize coffee talks in different cities, in Istanbul, in Ankara, in Izmir, it's and in Gaziantep, and so it's like a quite relaxed environment. We are while drinking coffee, people actually share experience. They can ask any questions. It can be silly questions as well. But at the end, people actually leave the meeting or gathering by learning something, actually. So building some awareness. And also, we have a space in Istanbul by the Bosphorus, and we also organize like professionals, events for professionals called BIM Days. And these are some examples of some. So universities inviting us that can you give us a conference or lecture to students about BIM, and because it's also building interest and awareness. And then doing events in Gaziantep as well, and with students. And also Gassan is actually our board member, advisory board member. So thank you to him, with some other colleagues as well. And so what are we doing in terms of capacity? So we are now kind of developing user-oriented training program, and then also students, for example, BIM experts, BIM student experts. So 4-year education. In the first year, so they are actually meeting BIM for Turkey group. In the second year, so they are taking some trainings in BIM, so about modeling, for example. In the third year, so they are actually be part of the organizing, events and part of the awareness building activities at the universities. And at the fourth year, they become BIM ambassadors, so they can actually lead the other student groups and also take initiatives in the events and education. And so we have also kind of a mentor and mentee relationship, bringing students and professionals through BIM for Turkey platform. So professionals can be a mentor for a student in terms of giving, sharing their experience in life in terms of to build a better, engineering career or architecture career in BIM. And these are the committees again. So we have, and there are numbers. And we also, for example, this is our space in Istanbul. So we also now get internationalization. So we have some partnership with MyBIM in Malaysia. So they came to Istanbul, and then we did some joint event together. And also, so some pictures from MEP, for example, BIM Days events about MEP. So experts or experienced professionals can come and share their experience with students and other professionals. And there's another, it's about facilities management, and also so strategic partnerships. BIM for Turkey, BIM Africa, for example. We just recently get a partnership agreement with BIM Africa, so to actually support each other. I mean, for example, there is some BIM initiative in Italy, so they are actually doing some BIM-oriented competitions, and they're actually asking us, can we actually disseminate our program in Turkey for so the groups or designers can come and join or to the competition. And now things actually evolving naturally. Now we're starting now webinars. So it is not just bringing people on a physical space, but bringing people together on an online venue, and then our friends or colleagues who would like to give a webinar, so they're actually delivering lectures through webinars across the world. I mean, we have, for example, advisory board members from, USA and different, Kazakhstan and also in Cyprus. But in time, it would like to, evolve, naturally, basically. And so this is Info Turkey, website address, and in conclusion, so we also, and observed and witnessed that, having this sort of platform helped to accelerate digital transformation, building awareness, and also in a positive way, and building interest, and also especially among students, they can actually, build a career towards BIM-based, skills and competencies. And then, so it's acting now as a kind of a central hub, although it's been just a year, we practically starting this engagement, and it's in paving the direction for implementation to be knowledge-based, hoping that because we keep talking about it, and there is now, we would like to also now, I think it's about the time now to talk to government initiatives, and they recognize, I think nationally, it's a win for Turkey has already been a well-known entity. And then we are hoping that, to engage the government to look at this, some governmental legislation towards industry implementation. Thank you very much.
I think you're very active with some good research on BIM over the past 10 years or more. My main question is, you have experience with BIM in the UK.
Yes.
And you've done very interesting, published very interesting papers on that. And now you're doing this in Turkey. How do you compare the two, because they're different cultures, different variables. So I think that would be useful to hear from you something about how both compare.
Yeah, if you compare, I think there is very systemic understanding in the UK, and everything should be planned well in advance, and then you have to execute that plan. But in Turkey, it is not like that. So people are actually very good doer. They want to do it without even planning properly. Let's do it. Let's start it. So in terms of planning, I think there is weakness, but people don't want to spend time with planning, and they just want to start do it, and make progress. If they get into it, if they think that okay, let's do it. Okay, let's start doing it. No planning. So you can do the planning at the same time with actually executing it. So this I think it's the culture, but that has also some complexities and also side effects basically, because there may be it's risky, isn't it? So it's risky, and then redo, repetitive, and rework can be actually even higher if you actually don't do planning. But I think that's the culture. But I'm trying to adopt myself, although sometimes I struggle. I'm trying to get on with it. But when they actually, when they get it and when they think that we should do it, so not much time spent on planning, and just very short time, just cook the plan and start doing it. But in the UK, it has to be very strictly well planned and identify the risks, and then even if it is the slow motion movement, it's progressing well, but no turn back. It's always moving forward. But in Turkey, so you can do it, but oh no, we have to go back. No, we have to. So two steps forward, one step backwards. Two steps. It's like that basically. But I'm trying to be resilient and trying to get on with it.
Thanks.
Can I make a comment on this point for the comparison between the UK and Netherlands? I think the turning point in the UK was mandating the BIM. So when there was a mandate in 2016, everybody was really forced. Before 2016, the knowledge and awareness about BIM was not that great. The leading countries at the time were Scandinavia, Finland, and Sweden. But then when mandating came in 2016, this was a turning point. So I think this makes a very big difference when people do it as something optional to work more efficiently, or they have to do it because there is a government.
Exactly.
Yeah, more than 3,000 people actually attended, and become member for in being for turning activity. More than 3,000 people. I was not expecting it actually, and I don't think I can achieve the same thing with a short time, with a big number of people, and it's actually increasing. It continues. So it's now. I don't need to engage. I don't need to do anything. There are people in Ankara, Izmir, Istanbul, Antalya, Gaziantep. They are organizing it. They are telling me, "We are okay. Do it. Just go do it." So they are doing so.
And I just say, very, very good presentation, and it's good to see being implemented in a very, very big public project. So that was very, very good. I just want you to share your experiences. I know both of us have worked with BIM many, many years, but can you share your experiences in terms of the involvement of government as a client on BIM projects vis-a-vis private clients in big BIM projects? Does the role of the client, whether it's a public client or a private client, in projects like this?
That's a good question. I mean, the central government has no such, leadership, or they don't have they don't have any policy on that. But the municipalities, local governments, has a better understanding. I mean, for example, the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, they have this BIM, rules. For example, there is actually underground metro project, and it has to be done in BIM. It's actually done in BIM at the moment, and it has to be managed with BIM. The BIM-based facility management for the metro and for the whole Istanbul. And the Istanbul municipality is actually leading as a governmental entity in terms of, as a client at the same time for the use of BIM. So, but the central government is actually trying to do like wait and see at the moment. But other municipalities as well, following Istanbul, like Gaziantep, Ankara. So, for example, there is an international consortium of doing Gaziantep metro, Italian and Spanish, designers and contractors. I'm sorry, it's just designers at the design stage, but I believe the same design contracting company will do the construction. They are designing the metro infrastructure in BIM, and they, it will be executed in the BIM model, basically. So in Gaziantep, this is. But that's it really. And in terms of BIM use, there are big construction companies like Kalyan Construction. They are building BIM, capacity, BIM office specifically, to manage, to design, and to use, especially mobile BIM. BIM has become very popular on construction site for the monitoring and the progress control and the the quality control. They use mobile BIM. And Renaissance and also TAO, they are actually they've got big capacity or ability, let's say, competency in use BIM. But the main demand is coming outside, for those companies, international companies. So because the international clients asking them to use BIM, but central government in Turkey, they don't have any such BIM requirement at the moment. But so when we actually get stronger, I think when time comes, we'd like to talk to them as well. I think at the same time, interestingly, this initiative has led to the Building Smart to launch its chapter in Turkey as well. So there is now Building Smart Turkey chapter is also launched about 6 months ago. So they are also looking at the standards and the IFC open BIM use in construction projects, trying to develop a library for the subcontracting or manufacturing companies providing supply to construction projects.
Right. Thank you very much, Yusuf.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mariam, and I'm a PhD student at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, and my presentation is on emerging technologies in construction, health, and safety management. This study examines the characteristics of research on digital technologies for construction health and safety by adopting a bibliometric analysis approach. And the study categorized the digital technologies within the construction-related fields and also identified gaps and trends for future research to guide research directions on the application of emerging technologies for construction safety. So the bibliometric analysis focused on country and region distribution of these technologies, the number of publications annually, and trends of research topics on technologies for construction health and safety. So the study categorized these technologies into 3 categories: people technologies, and these technologies are applied to ensure the health and safety of people by what they wear. Examples are robotics and automation, smart PPEs, and wearable technologies. And then process technologies are applied to ensure safe execution of the construction activities at the operational level. Examples are IoT, artificial intelligence, BMI, 3D, and 4D CAD. And environmental technologies are technologies applied to the environment during construction health and safety. So for this study, the methodology, this is the methodology that was adopted. The Scopus database was used as the data source for this study. And the keywords that were imputed into this database were safety, digital technologies, and construction. And the output from the Scopus database was limited to only journal articles and conference proceedings published in the area of construction. And book reviews, editorial materials were excluded from the data set. After the whole filtration process, 3,133 relevant publications were selected. And to further filter this output, the titles of these relevant publications were reviewed. Their abstracts and keywords were also reviewed. To also further filter the output, articles that were in engineering but not in the construction field were eliminated. Articles on construction safety but not written in English language were eliminated. Articles that were not conducted between 2009 and 2019 were eliminated. And articles that focused on other aspects of construction issues but did not directly address issues of construction safety were eliminated. After the entire filtration process, a total of 240 publications were retrieved. This included 84 journal articles and 156 conference papers. To further analyze this data, this study adopted the use of the Voice Viewer software to analyze the statistical evidence obtained from the data source. So looking at the country region distribution, the Voice Viewer analytical function was set to a minimum of 2 publications per country. This means that the Voice Viewer software was expected to retrieve countries that had published a minimum of 2 articles on digital technologies for health and safety. And at the end of the whole process, it was shown that a total of 10 countries met this criteria. And as you can see, the countries with the highest documents on digital technologies and health and safety in construction were the United Kingdom, United States, and China. But the United Kingdom, with a number of 14 documents, had the highest number of citations. Computer software, information management, and was summarized as automation and robotic systems. Cluster 6, represented in the light blue shade, reviewed keywords such as safety, digital radiology, digital radiography, risk assessment, accident prevention, and was summarized as safety and accident prevention. Then cluster 7, which had 3 members, sorry, these are the number of members in each cluster, which had 3 members and was represented in red.
So findings from these concurring keywords revealed that research on construction health and technologies for construction health and safety focused on safety design and planning, visualization and image processing for construction projects, project monitoring, application of IoT to construction projects, automation and robotics for construction safety, and the evaluation of structures to enhance construction safety. This slide here shows an analysis of trends of research topics on technologies for construction health and safety from 2009 to 2019. So this image here shows an overlay visualization map which was derived from InforceViewer software. So this box here shows, represents colors in this diagram for each of the years. So between from 2009 to 2012, which is represented in a dark blue shade, found keywords such as virtual instruments, digital instruments, computer simulation, and sensors. 2013 here, which is a lighter shade of blue, found keywords such as digital avionics, cameras, designs, hazards, and digital control systems. So this shows that research on digital health and safety technologies for construction in the year 2013 focused on use of digital avionics systems such as drones and the design of digital control systems for construction safety and construction safety hazards. In 2014, keywords such as reliability, monitoring, safety testing, automation, image processing, information technology, and remote control were found, and this shows that majority of the research conducted in construction H&S technologies were on use of automation and information technology for construction site safety and safety monitoring. In 2015, keywords such as digital storage, safety engineering, accident prevention, risk assessment, human-computer interaction, and digital devices were found, and this shows that in this year, research on robotics and automation for accident prevention and intensified issue. Research on robotics and automation for accidents prevention were conducted, and this research also intensified issues of safety engineering and risk assessment. Between 2016 and 2019, it was found that keywords such as architectural design, life cycle, image analysis, cracks, strain measurement, law and legislation, and decision-making were found to co-occur in the network visualization map. And this shows that research within this duration was majorly conducted on innovation, design, and sustainable concepts for the evaluation and analysis of structures, and decision-making and safety laws and legislations in the construction industry. So this study concludes that this study identified 7 main research topics, which was identified here in this in the network visualization map, and then we also found 5 emerging trends from 2009 to 2019. If you look at the country region distribution, it was found that there was no African country represented. So this shows that research on construction health and safety technologies is underrepresented in Africa, and identifies a gap for future research on construction health and safety technologies in the African context. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for your presentation. I would like to ask the audience for any questions for Mariam. Any questions? Well, so I would like to ask you, Mariam, if this is like part of the PhD or the PhD itself? None of these. Just like a literature, it's a review paper. So you're a PhD student working on another topic?
We are working on women in construction.
Women in construction, which is the topic which is different from this year. Well, obviously, if it was a topic for the PhD, I would have like commented about the gap in knowledge and all these kind of things. But this is quite an extensive overview of the literature on that topic, which I think is very useful for us. If there is no more questions, we can move on to the following paper then. But thank you very much, Marie. Thank you.
Just to put it a little bit into context, what I'm presenting today is a literature review, but it's part of a number of projects that I've been working on smart ecological urban corridors. So my main interest has been on visualization of data. So what does this mean? Put it into plain words, it means that we are connecting and we are collecting a number of data from different sources, especially within the smart cities context. How that data is being used and how that data is being explored from a decision-making point of view is still not quite developed. So I have been exploring, along with a number of partners also at Salford, data visualization. So how do we translate the data? How do we put it into context so that others can make more informed decisions, and what can we do with it? So I've done some case studies. This is the last case study I've been working on for the past year and a half, which is the Manchester Ship Canal. So I've been looking at different types of GIS information and maps, and then I've been connecting them also with national statistics, strategic plans from the councillors, and then putting it all together so that data can appear in a more easy way for all the stakeholders involved in the process of urban planning and decision making to make different decisions or to reschedule and reshift when things aren't working appropriately. So we came to a point where we actually understand that we need also BIM data and we need GIS data. Obviously, this has been quite explored also in terms of connecting both and integrating both systems. I've been looking at it from a development of smart ecological urban corridors. So this is what I'm presenting today, is a literature review on the integration of both, always with the aim of these smart urban corridors. So today, this is obvious to us, this is what we've been hearing for the past 2 days. The world is facing a number of challenges that challenge not only, the challenges don't relate so much with technology, technology is there for us. The issues have to do with people, processes, and integration. So climate change, we need more effective measurements to do that. We are collecting all of this data. How can this be explored? Infrastructures, we now know that we just don't have to think about the physical infrastructures, we have to think about the technological infrastructures and the human infrastructures, and we have to manage them. And governance is actually a big one. For me, the biggest issue in all this equation is governance and people. So, and the ecology of cities, with the predictions from the UN that cities will grow by 70% in population by 2050. So that's not so far away from us. And obviously the economy and the strings that attach all of us together. So whatever happens in China now has repercussions in every part of the globe. So how do we deal with all of this, especially at our level? I'm an architect by background, and this has always been kind of a, we are at the forefront. We are always guilty about all the decisions that are made in design and urban planning. How can we make the best use of data also for us? If not, we could be looking at this kind of scenario in the future, which is not really what we want to do, I think. So more of a, instead of dystopia, let's think about the challenges and let's quantify them. Let's think carefully about what they are. So cities growth, infrastructures, maintenance, and how we actually address the repurpose and reuse, inclusiveness. Especially in Europe, we're facing with aging population, and we're facing with severe issues in terms of health issues for communities, entire communities. How do we deal with inclusive design? And this is also at the city level. So we can't think of cities as we did before. We need to think ahead of the game. Technology and connectedness, and this for me is the key word. It's not about technology. It's there. You can evolve it. Our computer science are amazing. They've developed amazing things, amazing products. How do we make it best to work for people? So with this in mind, the changes that we need to quantify are the resources, people, process, technologies, and the increased fast pace of technology, which is also something that we feel like we always need to keep up. social media, all kinds of devices. If a new iPhone gets out, people need to have it. Is that sustainable? Is it something that we want to do, or do we want to integrate that? So when we look at smart ecological corridors, the main thing here is that rural is no longer rural. Rural is designed by us, so it's part of urban now. So in that scenario, how are we designing rural? How are we integrating urban and rural areas? So humans have ecological demands. This also has to do with health. Health has been proved by a number of research that needs to be connected with nature so that people feel better and supported and feel nurtured. Biodiversity loss, we need this connection. We need to keep nature in its state, and we need to keep it. Geographically, typologies, industries, integration. Let's face it, we need industry. We can't just think, oh, industry is there, but we're not going to use it because it's harm. It's not. We just need to rethink about it in terms of clean energies, clean industries. How can we make the most of these technologies to actually produce and develop different ways of thinking for industries? So from urban ecological corridors, we have a number of them that have been identified either by their structure or their function. From their structure, we have these 4 types, but you can have more than one, obviously. You can have an integration of different types of urban corridors. The main idea is that the connections between nature, the built environment, and people are in harmony, and they can be balanced out instead of being unbalanced, which is what we're experiencing today. So it's making the most of our natural resources, keeping them and improving them so that the technology can be used also to support its development. In terms of its function, we can have barrier corridors or we can have communication ones. And these have different kinds of characteristics, but again, they can also be combined depending on what we want out of them. Ecological corridors are important in the sense that we have, around the world, we have a number of waterways, and waterways have always played a part historically. So we know that they've been used for defense purposes, we know that they've been used for exploration purposes, cultural purposes, and we need to go back to that and treat the waters and treat the communities around the waterways in a cared manner. So this is one of the most known examples, which is Seoul, so Cheonggyecheon. And this that you see here was previously a river. So this is in Seoul, Korea. And it had a lot of issues with pollution, the river. So at the times in the 70s, they decided to do a 6-lane highway. It was a disaster, obviously. From a traffic point of view, it was really difficult to manage. People didn't like it. Pollution levels were even higher. But it was only until someone that had high political aims decided that we should revert back to that in 2003 that actually something was done. So in terms of the key drivers for developing these corridors, we have identified throughout a number of case studies that we've developed, we've identified economic connection, connection with nature, resilience, health, population, culture, and lifestyle. These can be the key drivers individually, but if they are combined, it's even better. So these are the ways that we should be thinking about urban corridors. But we're not alone anymore. So we have to think about the ICITEE. And the ICITEE is all about connectedness. It's about making humans, things, and computers completely connected. So we are taking sensors. We have sensors all over our cities. We're connecting all of this data. What else? What's coming? What can we do with all of this? Specialist designers. This has infinite possibilities, but it's still us, human beings, that need to make sense out of it and need to make it work. So for me, this is quite a good starting point. So after this long journey, I'm thinking we need data from smart cities and smart buildings. So one of the things that I found out after these case studies and the literature review is that we need the BIM assets, the information. We need the information from infrastructures that exist, that are built. We also need smart buildings information so that we can make this whole system work. How that integration can be done, that's the next stage. So ideally, you would have data from smart cities and smart buildings. We gather the data and we put it in a way, and the way that we've been working on is translating the GIS into maps that people can read. So we do health maps, flooding maps, deprivation, income, and we map the whole thing along with the strategic plans from the councils. And then we design. We think, okay, with this data, what should be addressed? So if we see that when we overlay two maps, one is with access to natural environment and one is, for example, obesity in children, we realize that the highest levels of obesity are related with people not having access to green areas. Then we can make something about that, right? We can actually act on it. So we design it and we consult with the communities. Funny thing about communities is that they always have something interesting to say, and these days with the media has its ups and downs, obviously, its pros and cons. But one of the good things is that people want to be active in the way that they develop their cities. So, for example, in the Manchester Ship Canal, they wanted to do urban farming. Great. We would have never come up with that on our own. We know about the data, but it was after they saw the data in a different way that they actually came up to that. But we need to build it into practice. This is a huge step for us, especially as designers, but also after construction also, one of the poorest, low performance sectors all over the world. And then we design it again and we go through the whole cycle. So hopefully this would be the ideal scenario. What's the contribution of big data? So these are some of the V's of big data, but these are also the challenges of data. What can be used, what is actually useful from the data, and what can we extrapolate from it? So these are enormous amounts of information that we're collecting. So when we try to understand the issues there are two different systems. They were created for different purposes. They have their own standards. They have their own ontologies, their own taxonomies. So one of them, GIS, deals with macro data, and BIM works for micro data. So how can we actually think about how we can integrate both of them? So the first stage is to try to identify the challenges. There are a lot of theoretical frameworks on how both systems can be used. Still a practical or effective one, I still haven't come across any. There are some attempts, but not the definite thing yet. So the main challenge seemed to be around this, and you can see one of them is big data. So the volume and the variety and the velocity. It's not just about the data. It's trying, when you look at the data, you need to think, what are the data sets that you need? Where are the patches that you're trying to find or that you might find? Keep an open mind about that. But the data sets and how you overlap them to then see what can be the outcome. So this is quite a huge stepping stone. And we are aiming at city information modeling. So if we can have a spatial planning that actually, a city model that actually encompasses all of this, and most of all that it's in real time and it's predictive, we can actually make visualizations and predictive modeling in the future. And this can be a huge step for everyone. So this is kind of an idea of what are both of them, how they work. We will need an open spatial database and an open BIM database. But most of the authors, and it seems that the driver will be about web semantics. And that should be potentially the way forward in terms of integration of both systems. What can this be used for? In terms of big data, I have analyzed and found out that these are kind of the data sets and the way that we can actually achieve agile policies, and that will help support governance and visualization and modeling. So making sense of data for everyone involved in the process. So this is one of the major issues. The impact for smart urban futures can be huge. If we want everything connected, we need to make sure that you have to think about the human behavior. And the human behavior is the only thing that you can actually not predict. Even if you think you can, people always surprise you. And that's a good thing. That's the beauty about us being humans. But we need to think about all the good and the bad that can come out of it. Obviously, for this to happen at a urban corridor ecological development, we can map different layers in terms of biodiversity, but we can actually map it with the natural and the built environment together. Infrastructures and natural environment together, we can have a far better modeling and visualization for the future. And I think this is the next stages of this is to actually have applied for a number of calls to develop more case studies around Europe and outside Europe also around waterways, disused waterways. So what if, and this comes from the Manchester Ship Canal project, instead of having this, and the community said there's no connection with any of the natural environment, as you can see everything is fenced. There's no connection with the water. What if we could have this? So this doesn't come out of my mind. This comes out of the community engagement, the literature review, the several workshops, and all the development of this project for quite some time now. What if instead of thinking of industries like something that it's awful and you shouldn't have in our landscape, we actually integrate it? This is only allowed if we know the data, because otherwise we're just doing pie in the sky. And we want to do things with things that already exist. Smart cities are not something that we do from scratch. Smart cities are our cities in the future. And now, the future starts now, as we say, right? So, in conclusion, it's identifying the patterns between the data sets with trying to integrate both systems. It's the correlation between the different layers, so life expectancy, nature, access to greenways, flooding, which is quite a huge thing also in the UK, biodiversity and landscape, existing natural and built infrastructures, and who is part of the process? Who are these stakeholders? They're all of us. We are them. So it's everyone, from the people that make decisions to the people that design, to the people that are going to use all the infrastructures and all the decisions that you make. So visualization and modeling can assess existing scenarios, but can also help us to produce future scenarios. And this one is also from that project, and it's not like this. But it looks better. But it also looks like it could be there already. And that's the thing. It's not completely out of order. And this goes right in line with you. You know, it was on the 20th of November. Do you know that?
Yeah.
So that was the deadline for Blade Runner scenario. It was the 20th of November, just last week. It didn't happen yet in terms of the buildings and in terms of the built environment. But socially, I think we're there. Sorry about that. But we are definitely in the digital revolution. I think it's how all of us actually embrace it and how much we can make out of it for us, for our communities, for our children, for the future. And I don't mean just in Bahrain, I mean all over the world. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I have to relate, to be honest with you, with my research paper, which was published in this conference about future visions of architecture. But if you start speaking about this, I believe I'm going to take all the time. So probably we'll have a chat about that later.
Yes.
And I'd like to ask the audience for 2 questions.
But the idea is not to do the green per se. The idea is to connect everything. The idea is that we don't lose part of the green, or we don't kill the green in detriment of something that might not work. From an economical point of view, the drivers that I've just shown you are all, in the end, they're all economic. Let's face it, for example, one of the issues in the UK is health. The NHS spends billions of money on people's mental health, but also in terms of general health. In the Manchester Ship Canal, the areas, when we overlay all the maps, we actually could make a correlation between obesity in children, which has exponentially grown 100% in the past 10 years, between Liverpool and Manchester. When we overlay the maps, the communities with those levels of obesity are actually the ones that don't have access to parks and natural areas. If you sell this to the NHS, are you sure they're not going to think about the economic side of it? I think one of the things that I found is governance. And in numerous discussions that we had, because we held a number of workshops with different stakeholders, I found it very funny that, for example, the Greater Manchester Authority, there was someone from the planning area there, and they said, we're connecting, they have an open org site that all of you can access it, and it's quite good because you can freeze the layers that you don't want to see, but if you want, you can have all the information that they're collecting for smart cities. And this person, who is a high-end planning in the decision-making process, was telling me, we're collecting all of this information, Sarah, and we have this data, and everybody asks me for money about the data, because that's true. You do it, but they get money to do it. And then I don't know, how does this translate into, how do I know what this means? They can't see it because they're not data analysts. So you need to put it in a way that everyone can see it. So that's why we use GIS, and that's why we translate it, even in infographics, for example. And then people see the value of what they're getting. Cities are already paying for the sensors for the ubiquitous city. They're paying for the sensors to be there, they're paying for the connections, and they're paying for the servers that collect all the data from all the cycle within a smart city. But they need to understand what's the value for money. One of the major things that came out of the Manchester Ship Canal, which is about, I didn't brought that one because it's about to be published, is the agile policies. So most people think that one of the biggest barriers is to actually try to develop agile policies. That's, I think, it's the biggest barrier.
Right. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. You guys sleepy like me? I ate too much, so I'm just tired, but I'll try and get through this next 20 minutes. Right, so my name is Hadi, and I'm going to present today on embedding Industry 4.0 technologies in the UK construction infrastructure sector. So just a bit of a background on myself. I did a bachelor's in civil engineering 3 years ago now. Been working as a BIM coordinator for various companies in the UK on road projects. And I'm also doing my PhD on Industry 4.0 technologies in the UK infrastructure sector. So this paper is basically very related to my PhD. So as an introduction, the construction industry is really evolutionary right now. We know that in the UK, the population is growing. So as a survey, in the mid-2018, last year, there was 66.4 million people in the UK. And by 2041, it's estimated to increase to increase by 9.7%, which is a massive increase, basically, because there's a million, so obviously it's a massive increase. And we have to think about where all these people going to live, what schools are the kids going to go to. Obviously, there's going to be more people, so more cars on the road, so we have to create more roads, more hospitals, more schools, and so on. So this is basically, the UK government, they invested a lot of money into infrastructure over the next couple of years just to accommodate for this population growth. So we hear a lot about smart cities, smart motorways, and so on, and all of these root from Industry 4.0 technologies. So I was working on a smart motorway project, and it basically has a lot of technology into it, which is basically Industry 4.0. So they're all kind of similar. It's still in its early stages in terms of infrastructure and construction. So 2 weeks ago, I went to the Autodesk office in Birmingham, and they were basically using robots. I didn't even know this, but they were not human robots, but building robots, like doing additive and subtractive manufacturing. And I asked them, I was like, do you create anything for, let's say, a road? So all they were creating was car parts, stuff for the fans in the aeroplane. So they didn't mention anything about the actual construction sector. So this is why, like, if we actually incorporate all of that to the construction sector, we could benefit from it. So based on a survey in 2017, 67% of the UK construction industry say that they've actually heard of Industry 4.0 technologies. The survey was done, and I saw it on one of the reports online, but I kind of doubt that figure, because in the office, when I ask anyone about Industry 4.0, they don't really know what I'm talking about. However, 25% of these people feel that they actually understand the opportunities they can gain from these technologies. So before starting this research, I thought I need to have my research questions down. So they were basically, what are the technologies that are related to Industry 4.0? What are the current state of these technologies in the construction sector? And which technologies have actually been adopted by all the construction sectors in the UK, or some of them? And what is the future of these technologies in the construction industry? So just a few of the technologies. So things like simulation, like having a 4D sequence of a 3D model. BIM is also part of an Industry 4.0 technology, even though it's kind of its own thing as well. Big data. So nowadays, big data is very popular. And as part of BIM, you could say BIM kind of incorporates big data as well, because all the assets need to have data on them. Autonomous, can't say the word, that word, robots. Yeah, so as I've mentioned, the Autodesk office, we're actually creating stuff with robots. Those are just a few of the technologies. If you want to know more about the technologies, you can have a look at my paper. So the current state of these technologies in the industry. So BIM is mandated in the UK since 2016 for all public sector projects. So there's no doubt that public sector projects are going to use it, but are they actually using it in the right way? So level 2 is mandated, but are they actually level 2 BIM? There's VR and AR, so most companies, I know of 3 projects that are using virtual reality. However, it is accessible, but clients might think, is it, because you have to buy the VR set, they might think, is it something that we have to actually invest in? Would it actually work? Would it benefit us? Robotics, like I've mentioned. Another thing that I learned at the Autodesk office, the first 3D printed bridge is actually being done right now in Amsterdam. They said that, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Drones, so mostly at the office I'm working at and the previous offices I've worked at, drones are mostly used for surveying of existing assets. So they survey the existing assets, and because we all use BIM, we have a 3D model and they can compare the design against existing assets. And modular construction, so having assets made off-site and then imported into site and being built. So the methodology for this research, so basically conducted about 15 interviews with 4 various projects in the infrastructure sector. And case studies were also done on these projects, and I also did some observations. So just chatting to people and trying to get knowledge from them and seeing if they actually know about Industry 4.0 and so on. So this is just a summary of the 4 projects that I looked at. So one of them was an infrastructure project. I say infrastructure because it was a nuclear power plant, so I didn't want to put nuclear on there. 2 of them were highways, and one of them was rail. So in the first project, 3 interviews were taken, and this is a construction of a new nuclear power plant. It also had a new road layout to be built, and also some structures, and a lot of material had to be excavated as well. So in terms of Industry 4.0 technologies, they implemented BIM. You would find that all the projects I'm going to talk about have BIM, obviously. Yeah, so they basically used the building information model from the designers to create 4D sequences. Because they had to excavate a lot of material, these 4D sequences were very helpful for the site team, so that they can know what material they're meant to excavate, what time and what stage they're meant to be at. at a certain time. They also implemented a 5D project planning software, which basically incorporated cost into the 4D sequence, which had the time element and the 3D model. So that was very helpful. And that's an actual picture of the 3D model of that job. So the two other, one second, try to hold this. The two other projects are highways projects. So they're both smart motorways. So in England, we usually have 3 lanes on a motorway. So they're expanding the 3 lanes into 4 lanes and having ERAs and technology into it. 9 employees were interviewed for both of these projects altogether, and one of them was located in the Midlands in England, and the other one was in the South. So, as I've mentioned, drones are mainly used to actually get the point cloud of the existing assets. So they used drones, and that's the point cloud that they came up with of the existing asset. And they also had a 3D model provided by the designers, which they incorporated to look at the existing versus the design. Yeah, and this is a picture of the second one. So as you can see on that picture there, they've basically incorporated the point cloud from the drones with the drainage model. So those are just the manholes and the pipes. This project, the second project, also used modular block retaining walls, which they actually won an award for because they were actually being innovative. They also had BIM, obviously, and the thing about Industry 4.0 technologies, it is as simple as having an iPad on site. So what this project did was they basically had the check sheets and everything done into the common data environment. So the site team would take an iPad outside, instead of having to take out paper and ticking it off, coming back into the office, having to scan it and then import it into the common data environment, which would take time, and they might also lose some of the papers, so loss of data. So this was one of the good things that they did. So as simple as an iPad, you could be having an Industry 4.0 project. So the final project was a rail project. It was the High Speed 2, and this project is basically, well, 5 interviews were taken, and it's a high-speed railway connecting the Midlands, east of Midlands, to the south of London. Yeah. So in the beginning during the tendering stage of this project, it was a bit difficult because a lot of people didn't want it going on. But the designers then got a lot of these technologies like virtual reality, having 4D and everything, to basically allow the clients and the stakeholders to visualize what it can be like to get them on board. And it worked, so yeah. They're using the model, they have a BIM model, so they're using that for clash detection, visualization, 4D planning, and so on. So as just a summary, looking at those 4 projects, they've mainly used technologies, a CAD and cloud-based website. But looking at the results, with BIM, you're meant to have a model, so CAD. You're meant to have a common data environment, so your cloud-based website. However, all these other technologies that I mentioned before were not being used. So it's only because it's mandated, so they're using like CAD and a cloud-based website. So it's basically because they don't really know if Industry 4.0 technologies was mandated, then they would actually branch out and actually use more technologies. But because it's not, they're just using what is actually mandated. To conclude, based on the case studies, Industry 4.0 technologies is quite in its infancy in the UK in terms of infrastructure. Other sectors, such as architecture, mechanical, electrical, they may be more advanced in terms of using these technologies. To basically summarize it, it's something that not a lot of people have actually implemented these technologies, so they can't really see the benefits to it. If one project implemented most of these technologies and showcased the benefits, people would actually be more confident in it and actually want to use these technologies. So to further my research, I'm planning on trying to get my company to invest in more technology, and we'll see how it goes. I might be back here, next time, letting you know if it's good news or bad news. And that's it, guys.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not sure if it is you can hear me well. My name is Mohammed Salama. I'm in Heriot University. I'm currently the Director of Corporate Executive Relations and former Head of School of Management in the Dubai campus. My journey with construction started back in '87. I had my first degree, bachelor in civil engineering with the first class. And then I went to the industry. I worked for, I don't know how many years, but till the end of the 90s, when I was starting to get really worried about the construction and how the delays in payments and all the sort of things. And I was headhunted by mergers and acquisitions company in the City of London. I ended up on the board of directors, merging small nursing homes, as we call them in the UK, to become specialized hospitals. This is when I started doing my MBA, and again, I was headhunted by Ammar Kaka, who was the professor of construction management, to do a PhD in construction management. And I started an academic career in the very early 2000s, which was like 15 years after my graduation. Anyway, I'm interested in sustainability, and I moved from civil engineering and built environment to management to get the free hand to work on project management in the wider context of project management. At the moment, I have 2 textbooks. One project management basic textbook that is teaching textbook for project management courses, and another one that's the interesting one, which is called Principles of Sustainable Project Management. That's a completely new way of looking at managing projects, and my introduction to this is we cannot really manage projects in the future with all the digital transformation and everything happening that is very different from what happened or what used to happen in the past with theories that belong to the past. We need to revise those theories, or at least the approach. And I think in this model that's called Sustainable Project Management Model, I introduce this sort of new approach. Coming to this presentation, so that was a brief about what I'm doing. I'm interested in sustainability. I'm interested in innovation under sustainability. And I'm interested in all of this from a project management perspective. This piece of research that I'm going to introduce to you today is actually the outcome of my son's work. So when my son was doing his master's in facilities management, it was under one of our colleagues, because now, as I told you, I moved to management. He was doing it in built environment. He came to me and he said, well, can you help me with selecting the topic? I told him, well, you're a facilities manager already, or facilities manager. Well, you can, he's not really a manager. He's still young. He's 26, 27. So he said, yeah, I'm doing facilities management, but I still need your help with managing, selecting a topic. I told him, well, think about the future. What is this practice heading to? And we had a chat. And he told me, well, I'm thinking about something to do with the technology. I told him, okay. He said, we're doing something called CAFM, which is Computer-Aided Facilities Management. I told him, okay. He said, but I heard my professors talking about BIM, and I've read about it, and it's interesting. And I'm thinking to compare both of them. I told him, well, that sounds interesting. He said, do you have anything to add to me? I told him, well, why don't you compare both of them to blockchain? Just go and read about it. And this is how the story started. So we started to look at how BIM can be used for facilities management on a blockchain platform. The reason we thought about this is we are in Dubai, and the UAE has decided to move to blockchain. Everything to do with the government, smart cities, everything will be on blockchain. So it's not yet mandated, but it will be a mandate that everything will be on blockchain, starting our tenancy agreement to our driver license, you name it. So we thought about this, and I will share with you the entire presentation in one slide, but it will be actually, there will be other slides to elaborate further, but this will tell you, I'm not sure if you can see it from behind or not, but, or at the back. So this is our research area and the gap. We looked at facilities management as an area. We looked at BIM for facilities management. And here I must mention Professor Yusuf. We came across your very interesting work. And I thought, well, if someone has been doing this 10 years ago in 2008, I think that was your first work, perhaps, on this. Maybe you can't remember that. Yeah, it's your paper with Charles Egbo. I think it was around that time. And yeah, around 2008, okay. Well, this is the nice thing about being in an academic. Others know your work better than you. But this is because of your output. You're very rich with your output, but that's a good thing. Anyway, we came across BIM for facilities, and we found very few papers that are actually addressing BIM on facilities. Very, very few papers. And they are all high level, and perhaps it is something that has been done, I would say, what, 10 years ago, like Yusuf's work. There was other people who've done something, again, 2012. And recently, 2018, people are still saying the same thing that people were saying in 2008. So we thought, well, what's going on here? Why this is the case? So that we could identify a gap, that there is no progress for BIM on facilities, or on BIM for facilities management. And indeed, we couldn't find anything that links BIM on facilities and blockchain. So we thought that might be an interesting gap to start looking at it. We decided that we will have a strategic approach. That's master's level. So I thought, well, you know, I don't want him to dig deep for himself. He's got only 6 months to do his research. So I advised him to be more on a strategic level. So we thought, let's investigate the current practice, aiming to identify challenges and enablers, or critical success factors, as sometimes we'd like to call them. So we went through the literature review to extract a list of challenges and enablers. We extracted, I think, 16 challenges and around 20 enablers. I hope I'm right. I'll show you that in the next slide. So it's just, that was our theoretical framework. It was mainly from the literature. And we tried to implement some form of triangulation. So we had a survey with practitioners, but also was followed by an interview with experts to make sure that, you know, what we got from the survey makes sense. Because sometimes you just send out a survey, and the data you collected, sometimes when you look at it, I don't know whether it makes sense or not. It's just statistical analysis. You're looking at means and standard deviation. But when you try to verify and further validate this through a set of interviews with experts, that can be interesting, I would say, step forward. So we had the survey, and then we had our interviews. I'll leave this till the end, and I'll show you what we had. I'm not sure if you can see this list clearly from the back, but we had our list of challenges, the 16 that were identified in the literature, and this is the mean that we have got. So we were asking people to rank them, and I prefer a scale of 0 to 10. I know many people think, what is this? What is this 0 to 10? I prefer this scale where 5 means cannot decide. This is usually provides us with a better segregation, because sometimes when you're dealing with these issues on a scale of 5, Likert scale, the 4 and the 5 are scrambled. But if you stretch it to 10, some people, 6 is different from 7, is different from 8, and is different from 9. And this gives us better, I would say,
dispersion of the data. So we realized something interesting here. This is the mean score, but we realized that score 5, which means cannot decide, is significant, which is very, very interesting finding when you're running a survey. So look at this, please. This is the challenges. Look at the score of the frequency distribution of score 5. What does this mean? We had 142 respondents out of 300 sample. So our sample was 300. We received 142 replies or responses. 72 couldn't decide. 65 couldn't decide. 65. So this is actually a very interesting finding. That's why you must have a neutral point on your scale, obviously. But if it is not just the neutral means I'm indifferent, it is cannot decide, that's a different story. Because this means lack of awareness. Usually when you cannot decide, it is more likely to be lack of awareness rather than just neutral, meaning that, you know, indifferent. Because here we're talking about how critical these challenges or this challenge is. The same with enablers, we have significant. The good news is we also run a frequency distribution for those for the scores of less than 5. So now we have the 5, and the less than 5, the less than 5 were usually 10%, which means that we are quite happy with the ranking of our challenges. So we looked at our most critical challenges, the top 5. We discovered that cost-benefit ratio. Well, let me briefly tell you the story here. Currently, our facilities managers are using CAFM or computer-aided facilities management. And BIM is used by construction managers in Dubai. And when you go to ask facilities managers about BIM, they have no clue. They said the best answer is, we heard about it in some of the courses or some of the functions that we attended, but we don't know what's this about. So the lack of awareness, which was number 5, or score 5, that made sense. However, when we started to look into this cost-benefit ratio, of course, it's a change and everyone is concerned. We have a system now that apparently it is working. How much this will cost us. Security, given the incidents that occurred on Bitcoin, here we're talking not about BIM, but we're talking about the blockchain element. Challenges in the areas of quality control and accountability. Many of those whom we were asking in the survey, and then later on we discovered this from the interviews, they knew very little about blockchain. So they are experts in facilities, they know about CAFM, they know to some extent something about BIM, but when it comes to blockchain, very little. So it's all about stories. So again, challenges, information and interaction constraints by centralized authorities. This is a blockchain, and they don't know how this will be transparent, shared, because, you know, blockchain has got a public blockchain and a private blockchain. And if you're going to a public blockchain, that is like, you know, anyone can be sharing this information. Security against cyber attacks for this digital infrastructure. ICT infrastructure, which is quite interesting, and then lack of awareness leading to lack of acceptance and resistance to change. Lack of clarity in addition to the perceived immaturity of technology, privacy, technical scalability challenges, perceived time lapse, lack of relevant skills, etc., and absence of centralized regulatory body or system, which is government thing. So, by the way, all these challenges were not our challenges. These were picked up from the literature. So these are challenges identified by previous studies as challenges when you're moving to this. And they all seemed significant, but in this ranking order in the case of Dubai. The enablers, on the other hand, the second one was local government commitment into digital transformation initiative. I think we heard today many times people talking about BIM becoming a mandate in the UK. This is how enhanced the application and growth of BIM. And I think this came here as the same, so that's very interesting. But also data availability, which is very interesting, because if you really want a digital infrastructure and you have lack of data or people are not willing to share data, need to address inefficiencies in current systems and enhance the effectiveness of service delivery. Look at the first one, need to enhance efficiency and productivity. So we're talking about consistency here. Need to secure, enhanced awareness of blockchain, of course. If you want really to make this success, people do not know about blockchain, and the rest of the need to create a culture of trust, reliability within an organization. We heard people talk about trust this morning, and again, this is resonating quite interesting with that. Elimination or reduction of unauthorized fraudulent changes, better resource utilization. So a list of 20, these are all ranked from our survey, but as I said, they are all extracted from the literature. Anyway, because we're dealing with 16 items or factors in one list and 20 factors on the other list, we try to reduce the data reduction technique. One of the most famous one is factor analysis. We did the factor analysis with varimax rotation, and interestingly, we found that the challenges can be summarized into two components: technical and security, and resistance to change. So these are the two main components, or let's say dimensions. So the previous challenges, list of challenges, can be grouped under two components. There's either technical or security and resistance to change. The factor analysis for the critical success factors or enablers will be grouped under three components: IT system management, change management, and security. Interestingly, the interviews, we had some similar and interesting findings. The cost-benefit ratio emerged as the very critical one, which was back there. Also, the lack of awareness, which was shown in the data in the score of 5. But also, we found that security, although it came interesting and significant in the statistical data, was not really one of those major issues from interviewees' point of view. We also found that interviewees' point of view varied depending on which discipline they belong to. So if we're asking IT specialists, they have certain, I would say, issues and challenges. But if we ask facilities managers or construction managers, they would be highlighting a different set of priorities. So that was another thing. The IT infrastructure attracted some attention, particularly from IT specialists, and the enablers, again, the same thing. Managing stakeholders proactively, addressing pains and gains was an interesting factor, because we thought this is more of internal rather than, but this can be an interesting one. But still, most of the people interviewed, they mentioned the role of government, and they gave an example of how green building was not successfully imposed in Dubai until it became a mandate and imposed by the rulers or the government. So, main findings: lack of awareness. We had a list of challenges that were ranked and verified and validated by the interviews. And the conclusion is we have two dimensions for challenges: resistance to change and technical or security ones. And critical success factors, we have three dimensions: IT system management, change management, and security. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
First of all, there are two types of blockchain. You have the private blockchain and the public blockchain. And the private blockchain, it's just like the intranet. But still, you get the advantage of the blockchain that is, you know, the difference between the internet, by the way, some people call the blockchain the future internet. The difference between the blockchain and the current internet is this, our internet, people can change, modify, add, delete. There is an admin, but blockchain cannot, you cannot. What goes there stays there. You can update it, but you cannot overwrite it. You have to just say, okay, this is version 2, version 3, version 4. And this is the nice thing about it. But whether it is private or public, that's an operational detail. I don't think it undermines the benefits of the blockchain for transparency and trust. And I think we were talking about this morning, and the benefits still stays. I'm not an IT specialist. I'm a construction management specialist. At the moment, like when we're dealing with the latest applications of the technology. So blockchain so far seems to be an interesting application of the technology that we can utilize to our benefits. Like, for example, supply chain are using blockchain for authentication of products across the supply chain line, other things, so many different applications. So if there is an application that can fit with the current technology, I don't think this will be the end. When the technology, through the IT specialist people, change this and either, I would say, make it obsolete or develop it further, we will have to live with what we have. Every day there is an event promoting some application on blockchain. You know credit cards? They are promoting, and it is just the same notion. If we are the only people using the mobile phone, it has no value. But if you bring a million people to use the mobile phone, then it becomes really a valuable asset. And this is now what financial people are doing with the blockchain. And you can see every day there is an event about promoting some product through the blockchain. Usually some form of crowdfunding application and shared economy, applications of shared economy will bring people together, and out of this mass we create value. And usually those who are the founders are the ones who create value. But it is now it became like used model.
In the results from the interviews, you mentioned that one of the aspects was that there was a lack of awareness.
Yes.
I know we've mentioned it several times about what is blockchain. But because I can see some of our students here. So in simple terms, can you define what is blockchain and give an example, a practical example, so that...
For students, yes, not for experts. Yes. Blockchain is a shared ledger. You know what a ledger is? A book, okay? A book. In accounts, every transaction, we call it entry, and it's put in a book where we call it ledger. Accountants, they call it ledger, okay? So when we call this a shared ledger, that's the same thing. It's like a book, but it is online. Anything that goes on it cannot be deleted. Cannot be deleted. And if it is a public blockchain, everyone can have access to that. The good news is they cannot change anything. They can just add to it. So for example, you put something on this ledger or register, and someone doesn't like it. They put a comment, but they cannot delete yours. So just imagine it this way. In this respect, obviously people who will be contributing are the relevant people, or people who care to contribute to this. In this case, we're talking about very transparent tool or platform where whatever goes on it cannot be changed. There is obviously the private version of it where you can allow who will go on it or who can see what is on this register, but still they cannot change or delete or modify. So that is in essence what we mean by blockchain. And then it's blocks that are block after block. So in this respect, and I'm not really referring to the Bitcoin, Let me share with you this, and some people sometimes they don't like me when I talk about this. The idea about the blockchain, why it was started, it's actually started right after the financial crisis in 2007. And people who lost billions of dollars thought we want to make up for our money. So how can we do this? Let's start something that can be of good financial returns. So they invested tens of billions of dollars to create this technology, blockchain. And then that was mainly to cater for something called Bitcoin, which is cryptocurrency, money, digital money. And they launched that. And they did it in a way that no one can know who's launching it because there are miners. And then the first, I think when it started, it was $100 or less. It reached $14,000 for Bitcoin. They gathered their money. They don't need it anymore. We are left with the blockchain, which is their leftover. That's something, the byproduct that we are now enjoying. So let's remember, we are actually enjoying something that was not developed for the purpose we are using it for. We are actually enjoying the benefit of someone who did something for his own benefit, and they just left it for the rest of the people, you know, the ordinary people like us, to benefit out of it. And that's what we are enjoying at the moment. So bear this in mind. Cryptocurrencies or digital money or Bitcoin was meant to be money. This will never be accepted by governments, because governments cannot let go the sovereignty of their central banks. Central banks control the money. That's one hand of the economy. The fiscal policies are the other hand of the economy. And I teach economics for MBA, so I guess I know what I'm talking about. This will never happen. That's why cryptocurrencies are going to demise, or at least remain like, you know, one form of application in the digital world. But what stays and what we should be actually building and capitalizing on is the asset that we have, which is the platform, which is the blockchain. And I think this is what people are doing in several aspects of life. Government will not allow this go. However, if it is going to happen to be like digital currency, where governments can control or have some sort of, let's say, regulations about it, so that's fine. Remember, this is not credit cards. I always tell this to my students. Credit cards are conduits. Credit cards are medium. But this is money. This is actual money. Credit card is just a channel. You pay through it. But this is money. You pay with it. These are two different things. And monies are part of the sovereignty, or currencies are part of the sovereignty of nations or governments. So it is very difficult to let someone who we do not know who control their central banks and currencies. But thanks for this, sir. Thank you. Debatable. Yes. No, absolutely. This is exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying, who would be foolish not to accept a gift of tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars that's worth the investment that was put on to create this technology, this new platform. And it's given to us now. So who would not accept it? Actually, but this is a different story from thinking about the digital currencies and what the world, I think, this is my opinion here, I think the world is trying to adjust how to benefit of the digital currencies without losing sovereignty or trying to give away their sovereignty, which is perhaps just a limited view of mine. Ask yourself the same question about the internet. And I think the short answer is, why not both? It is definitely going to help with the process, but maybe through this application, you may find also new products that can work. Like, I'm not sure if you got my point or not. Yeah. But I think the process is what really matters most for us as project managers or facility managers in this case. Yeah, I don't want to, absolutely, but I don't want, I was invited a couple of weeks ago as a visiting professor in Schema Business School in Paris, if you heard of it, doing mainly lecturing on smart contracts on blockchain. remember that we're talking about smart cities, we're talking about smart governments, we're talking about digital transformation. The future will be more towards digital. And for this, you need a platform that is trustworthy. And trust has been mentioned here several times. So that is where the blockchain actually happens. Forget about Bitcoin and all the debates and discussions about Bitcoin. But the blockchain as a trustworthy platform, because of all what we have said in defining it, it is better suited, at least the time being, to be the host of these new applications towards the digital transformation. I think this is a major thing that defines. So for example, you know, people who are dealing with diamonds, or people who are dealing with halal supply chain, one of the things, or people who are dealing with organic food chain, well, as a supplier, imagine you own one of those posh restaurants and you're offering your customers quite expensive plates or dishes because it is organic or because it is whatever. You will have a mandate with your suppliers that this would be organic food. But how can you make sure of this? But if the whole supply chain is on blockchain with all the certification, it helps people to be more secure, or at least minimizes the risk. So trust, risk, supply chain management, these are existing applications, by the way. So diamond, for example, from the day, you know, every piece of diamond, it has a number and a certificate. If this goes on the blockchain, you will know who bought it and to whom, just like when you're buying a car with full history. So that, I think, is a very interesting application, already exists. What we are thinking about now is how to extend this further and beyond to our construction management and particularly facilities management in this case.
I think with these comments, we would like to conclude this session. I'm really glad that we have Muhammad Salama as the last presenter in this
Thank
session.
you very much.
Because it opened a lot of discussions and debates.
Thank you very much, yes.
We have another half an hour before the concluding session, so we can continue our discussion before the concluding remarks of the conference. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.